pleased that you all were able to join us this evening, and very much looking forward to the presentation. We have one more session in our summer series. That'll be, of course, next Wednesday, the 27th, and that will feature Rhonda Thomas. Rhonda is the president of the organization Truth in Education, and Rhonda's topic next week will be certainly very, very relevant, new threats to American education, what every Christian should know. Every teacher, parent, and student who is passionate about the power of knowledge needs to understand the concept of, quote, therapeutic education and how this is being used to transform the lives and values of our children and students. So please make a note to join us next Wednesday for Rhonda's presentation. Now, we're delighted to have with us this evening Donna Weeks. And many of you are familiar with Donna, but for those who are not, Donna was born and grew up in the metro Atlanta area. She graduated from Georgia State University in 1986. She got a degree in journalism. She also got a minor in marketing. Then she moved 3 years later to San Diego until she returned to Georgia nearly 20 years later in 2008. I guess the weather in San Diego didn't appeal to Donna, and she wanted to come back somewhere where it's a milder climate. Now, she and her husband, Paul, were married in 2012. Paul, by the way, has worked as a project manager with a climate control corporation for 34 years, where his primary client was Lockheed. He's recently, quote, retired, but actually he continues to consult for the same company and for Lockheed as well. Now, since 2017, Donna and Paul have been attending Johnson Ferry Baptist Church. Donna loves to study the Bible, and she loves to read various Bible commentaries and studies. She also enjoys reading novels and nonfiction in particular about culture, politics, psychology, sociology, and so on. And Donna also enjoys hiking in the outdoors and hopes to take up kayaking soon. So that's something to certainly look forward to. She finds the Old Testament particularly fascinating, but also enjoys learning about the early Christian fathers and the foundations of Christian history. She particularly enjoys Christian apologetics and loves learning and applying the lessons of the Bible to her own life and those of others. By the way, Donna has 2 grown kids, a daughter who will soon be graduating from Georgia State University, and a son who lives in San Francisco. So Donna, it's a real blessing to have you with us, and we're certainly looking forward to your presentation this evening on your experience and liberation, I guess I could add, from the New Age movement. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jeffrey. Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for being here. It would be so nice if we were in person, but thank goodness for Zoom so that we can all still see each other and talk to each other and fellowship. So it's a nice bonus. Anyway, so yes, thanks, Jeffrey. So yeah, I'll be talking about my journey today from New Age to New Life. I do want to have a little disclaimer here. I'm not an expert on the technical aspects of New Age. I don't know all the philosophers. I can't compare different theologies. I can't quote the people that wrote the books. But what I do have is I have this lived experience in the New Age beliefs. So that is what I'll be talking about this evening. Now, there were, I think, a handful of people that heard a short little presentation I did a few months ago as part of Jeffrey's class. And it was just about 10 minutes, but I did need to have a little revision to that, because when I spoke at that time, I spoke very emphatically that I was born and raised and taught in a home that from New Age beliefs. And in preparing for this talk, I spoke with my family members, primarily my mother. When I gave the talk before, I knew she might be a little touchy about this subject. And she was, but we didn't talk about it much then. But when I was going to do this expanded talk, I definitely wanted to talk to her out of respect. I wanted to make sure she didn't have her feelings hurt or anything. So I went to her and I said, so Mom, I'm going to do this. I've been asked to do this expanded talk on my New Age beginnings and my New Age childhood and growing up that way and going into Christianity. Her response was, so you really are going to tell them all about my subversive teachings, are you? So clearly there was a little bit of emotion there. So I reassured her that no, it was not subversive, that these were the beliefs that I grew up with. And I listed off a few of them for her. And actually, much to my surprise, a number of these New Age beliefs were not her settled beliefs. I was surprised. I kind of ticked off a few and she goes, well, no, not that. I'm not sure about that. Well, maybe that one. So I was surprised and actually, but pleasantly surprised to know that she's open to Christianity. So there's a door open there. So that I was pleased on that, but also still surprised. So I said, well, gee, maybe I'll talk to my brothers and find out their perception. I have an older brother who's only a year and a half older than me and a younger brother who's 5 years younger, younger brother, Jason and Scott. So I spoke to them. Lo and behold, their perception was a little different too. They vaguely recall the New Age teachings being in the home. They do remember one thing in particular. It was about auras, which I'll talk about later. Everybody remembered that. But it seemed that it didn't hit their radar like it hit mine. It didn't, they kind of ignored it. So my conclusion to that was two things. One, I think we've all heard the studies that if 3 people view like an auto accident, you're going to get 3 different stories. You're going to get 3 different perceptions. I think that's what's happened in our family. We're all in the same family, but we all have a different maybe view of how that family actually, what was going on day to day. Another conclusion I have is that my mother was my idol. I loved her. I was a mama's girl and I wanted to be just like my mother. And when she and I were talking about it, she says she remembers that time being a time of exploration, experimentation, searching. And I was between 9 and 12 during this time. And I think I heard it as settled belief. And as such, I functioned from it that way. So I wanted to clarify that really out of respect for my mother, because she and I are very close. She's my best friend, and I do love and respect her completely and don't want her to ever feel offended. And so I think that her search struck a chord in me that at a young age I took as that's what she believed, and that's therefore what I believed. Quite strongly, by the way. So I wanted to get that out of the way for the people that were there before and to make sure that I show due respect to the family. But as we go forward, I think we should try and listen, establish a little bit about New Age. New Age, it's such an ambiguous term. It's so broad that it's really hard to nail down. So in trying to kind of get a little bit of a specific definition, I went back to Jeffrey's teachings to get a definition that we probably have all heard. So from one of Jeffrey's teachings, he had written, New Age is basic pantheistic monoism of Eastern religions, where the self is center of reality and the center of the universe. I thought that was a good definition, but I gotta confess, I don't know about you guys, but a lot of times Jeffrey will say things or give definitions, and I have to make sure I really understand all the words. So I often will go through and kind of research on those. So I thought I had a really good concept of what pantheism was, but I looked it up just to be sure. So I looked up the definition, and there were 2. One was the doctrine of the universe conceived of as a whole is God, and conversely, that there is no God, but the combined substance, forces, and laws that are manifested in the existing universe. And then one that was a little shorter, but that pantheism is the belief that God and the universe are one and the same, that there's no division between the two. So I definitely can see that. And when I believe that pantheistic belief that we are God and God is us and God is the world and the world is us, and, kind of all together. And the second half of Jeffrey's definition of the self as center and the center of the universe, absolutely, I think that's the primary belief of all the New Age is that self is center. We are the center of the universe and the most powerful thing in the universe. So just to get, so we have kind of a clearer concept perhaps of what New Age is. And I think, so going forward, what I'd like to do is kind of, I'll kind of explain this New Age, the concepts, my home life a little bit, the concepts that were talked about and lived in my home, how those affected me, and then what beliefs I carry with me as I entered into young adulthood in my life, and kind of hit on key things in my life, circumstances and events that move me along on this journey. And also little where I could see along the way, God, of course, was there the whole time planting seeds. So that's kind of the overview of where I'd like to go this evening. So New Age, the modern New Age was birthed late 60s, early to mid 70s. And quite honestly, it wasn't really new. It's just repackaged ancient beliefs. But they kind of started gaining momentum here in the late 60s and early to mid 70s, which is about where my story begins. I was born in 1964, but 1974 seems to have been when my parents embarked on an exploratory ground into the New Age, and about the time when I was 9, 10, 11, 12, a pretty vulnerable age, an open age to things. So that's kind of where we started. But I did want to go back a little bit about my home life to kind of set that stage. Like Jeffrey said, I was born and raised in Georgia, not just in Georgia, small town in Georgia, Powder Springs, Georgia, if anybody has ever heard of that. It's way out in West Cobb. It's so small. We had one fast food restaurant, and it was Dairy Queen. I think mainly it might have been the only restaurant in Powder Springs when we were growing up. I remember when the first red light went up in Powder Springs, and it was quite the event, written up in a little paper. So it was a small town. So in this little small Georgia town with a church on every corner, we didn't go to church, not even on holidays. We did celebrate holidays very much so, but very much from a societal way with societal trimmings, but none of the religious. But even though we didn't have church or religion, contrary to what people may picture stereotypical New Agers, with incense and seances and long hair and headbands, we didn't have all that. We actually had a very traditional family. My mom and dad were very traditional and conservative. I'm very, very blessed. We were blessed to have my mom and dad together in a very secure, very structured home. We had, again, that traditional home. We had rules, we had consequences, we had chores. My dad was very much the dad. He was the no gray dad, right? Black and white, my way or no way. And that was dad. Mom was more the traditional nurturer. She was the ambassador of goodwill between mom and kids. So we really had that strong background. My brother had a really good quote, my younger brother, when I talked to him earlier. He said, I think of that we grew up in a home with biblical values, but no religion. So there were a number of biblical values in that structure. But alongside that structure, there were the spirituality. And so what did that look like? So I'll give you some examples of events or things that were in our home as we were growing up. One in particular that I really remember, and my mom and dad, and they had a couple friends. They went to this class, and they would go. I don't know how long they went, but I know they would go maybe once a week. And in this class, they explained this to us. They did this, I guess, like a led meditation. And in this meditation, they created these little helpers that were in their mind. And these little helpers in their mind would answer their questions or lead them into maybe a bigger explanation of things that were going on, or about their past, or about questions that they had. And I, of course, found it fascinating. And I think they did create these little helpers because it was kind of a point of amusement that my dad and his friend, their helpers were young, attractive women. So it was just a kind of an interesting event. Also, as part of this class, there was a meditation that I remember learning, and it was called Going to Level. And in this particular meditation, you would hold in your mind numbers, and you would hold the numbers 5, 4, 3 in your mind. And each number had a specific color. I don't remember what color 5 was, but 4 was blue and green was 3. And so you would have these numbers and it'd be like 5, 4, 3, and they would be bigger and they'd fade from color to color. And when you got to 3, you would put your fingers together and you would hold whatever thought it was in your mind that you were trying to manifest, whether that be doing well on a test or winning a ball game, or something as simple as changing a red light. We'd be in the car and we go 5, 4, 3, and we point at the red light and try and get it to change from red to green. So it was just something that was we would do in the family. And then, like I mentioned earlier, one thing that everybody did remember was looking at auras. I'm not sure if any of you know what auras are. Some may not. But what an aura is it's an energy, and it emanates from the body, primarily from the head. So you have this energy that emanates from you. And the energy has colors, mood colors. Maybe that's where mood rings came from. I don't know. But you have yellow, you have green, you have blue. And the yellow means happy and positive. Green is spiritual. Blue is peaceful. Red is passion or anger. So you have these colors, and it can be more than one color. You can have like yellow with a little blue around the outside. So it was specific. And the way that you would see these auras, and we would practice it, my brothers and I and my sister, I have a stepsister, and you would sit against a white background, the person, and the other person would stare above your head and kind of let your eyes go out of focus. And this color, this energy that was emanating from you would come into view, and you could see the colors. My younger brother, we thought, was particularly good at it, maybe because he was younger and he was more susceptible and more open to it, but we would have him try and look at people's auras when we were out. So anyway, that was a regular occurrence that we did. It was not unusual for us to discuss former lives or theorize about former lives. Or my mom and I would say, I bet I knew you in a former life, but we were just friends. We were friends then. Or what do you think you did? Or I bet I did that in a former life. Or I don't think this is my first time around. And I think I've been here a long time. I'm an old soul. So those were not uncommon in our family, because reincarnation was one of the beliefs. My grandparents on my mother's side, they were Christian Science attenders. They went to church. We call them Mimi and George, my grandmother Mimi and my grandfather George. And we didn't go to church. We didn't do any formal church of any kind. But I do believe that a lot of our positive thinking beliefs originated from there, because the positive thinking, the visualization, the picture what you want, that was very strong in the home. And I think that might have come from there. I mean, in the positive thinking, in that we draw to us those thoughts that we hold in our mind. Therefore, if negative things are happening around you, it's because your thoughts are negative. Your thoughts are wrong. Change your thoughts and you'll change what's happening. If you have negative thoughts, bad things, positive thoughts, good things. If you were sick, you didn't really want to come out and say, I'm really sick and I feel bad. It would be, I don't feel that great, but my body's healthy and I'm healing and my body's strong and I'm better. So you would want to state the affirmative more so than the negative, because stating the negative would affirm the negative. You wanted to make sure and assert things in the positive. I mean, it wasn't dictated, but that was the expectation. I'm looking at, so there were, and along those lines of positive thinking, it was that power of the mind to manifest whatever it was that you wanted, period. I mean, and there were 2 select Bible verses that were quoted, albeit possibly misquoted or, out of context. But one was, if you have the faith of a mustard seed, you too can move mountains. And in our home, that meant if you just believed enough that you could do whatever, then you could do it, just like the Bible says. So of course, the actual Bible verse is Matthew 17:20. And he replied, because you have so little faith, truly I tell you, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you. But in our home, it was, If you have the faith of a mustard seed, you can do whatever you want. You can make whatever happen by your own power. The other Bible verse, or the out of context or part of a Bible verse that was said quite often was, Jesus said, you can do as I do and more. Again, that indication is that the power that Jesus had was no more than the power that we could have if we would only release our potential and release ourselves from the shackles of our own doubts and our own limitations. Of course, the Bible verse is John 14:12. Very truly, I tell you, whoever believes in me will do works I have been doing, and they will do even greater things than these because I am. So obviously the difference is vastly different. Ours was, Jesus said, you can do as I do and more because of our own power. Jesus clearly is saying here, believe in me, and because I am God, then you can do these impossible things. So it was, again, that question, faith in what, that it never occurred to me to ask. It was a given belief and in support of the idea that we could do, again, like all that Jesus did, because Jesus was not God. He was just one of these fully evolved souls through reincarnation. In addition, our family, we were all quite avid readers. We all loved the books, usually nonfiction books and novels. But I remember, and again, as I was preparing for this, looking back, there were two books that I've always remembered fondly in my life, and did so up until this point, and went ahead and got those books, and they were very impactful for me. And I have to say, books have been impactful, are impactful, continue to be impactful for me. I love to read, and they're kind of my go-to. But these books in particular, I have realized now, and looking back, that had a large impact. They're going to sound pretty simple, but the two books that really we all read in the family, we all talked about, one was, it's Jonathan Livingston Seagull by Richard Bach. He wrote another book. He wrote two. Jonathan was much more popular, and the other book is Illusions. It was after Jonathan. Quite honestly, Illusions I found more impactful. I remembered it more, but Jonathan was much more popular publicly. It's really funny. I remember at one point mentioning Jonathan to Jeffrey, and he gave me a puzzled look, like he hadn't heard of that one. And I said, well, maybe not everybody's heard of it, but I looked it up. And it was a bestseller from in 1972. It was on the bestseller list for 37 weeks, and top publishers weekly books, best-selling books in 1972 and 73. And it really encapsulated those new age beliefs that were gaining momentum and gaining popularity, and really, I think, clearly steering people the wrong way. In general, I'm not going to go into anything too specific, but in general, they were written as fables or parable form, of course, making them all the more powerful, especially to someone young, again, between that 9 and 12-year-old age. And they were presented, again, so in that form, they're very powerful. And I did call a few quotes from the books to give you a flavor for what they were teaching. So from Jonathan, Jonathan Livingston Seagull, well, let me explain a little bit what the plot is. So in the plot, of course, Jonathan being a seagull, he wants to be a different kind of seagull. He wants to fly like an eagle. He wants to fly fast. He wants to do tricks. He wants to go high. He wants to do things. He doesn't want to be a regular seagull. He doesn't want to fight for food. He doesn't want to squabble with the other seagulls. He wants to be, they think he wants to be better and snobby. And so he was shunned from the seagull society. But he didn't care, and he continued to pursue his perfection. And eventually, after a long time, he dies. He doesn't really die. He goes to the next level where he then meets seagulls like him, and he continues to progress until he does all these amazing things and magical things. And he decides to go back to his seagulls and teach them what he learned, because he's like, they can do what I do. They just need to know that they can. So again, clearly that equation with trying to be a Jesus figure, and that's all that Jesus was. The second book, Illusions, similar, same plot, but it had people, not seagulls. You had a teacher and a disciple, really. The name of the full name of the book, Illusions, is Illusions, The Adventures of a Reluctant Messiah. So the teacher was ostensibly this elevated soul, and he was teaching this disciple. And there was also in this book, there's a disciple or a Messiah's handbook. So the quotes from Illusions came from that person teaching the disciple or from the handbook. And the quotes from Jonathan either came from Jonathan when he returned back to teach the other seagulls, or from the more advanced seagulls teaching him as he rose through the elevations of being. So so here's a few quotes from Jonathan. The first one being, "We choose our next world through what we learn in this one. Learn nothing, and the next world is the same as this one. All the same limitations and same lead weights to overcome." So again, that reincarnation, we're going to come back again and again and again until we get it right. Don't believe what your eyes are telling you. All they show is limitation. Look with your understanding, feelings. Find out what you already know, and you'll see the way to fly, but to live. So again, that don't believe what your eyes are telling you. That's not reality. The reality are your thoughts. Another quote, "I do not exist to impress the world. I exist to live my life in a way that will make me happy." Freedom is the very nature of being. Whatever stands against that freedom must be set aside, be it ritual or superstition or limitation in any form. So freedom as the pinnacle of everything. And then last one from Jonathan. To begin with, you've got to understand that a seagull or a person is an unlimited idea of freedom, an image of the great goal. And your whole body from end to end is nothing more than your thought itself. So again, that whole teaching that again, we are what we think, and we can see the manifestations of that in our world today, how terrible and toxic that is. So that was Jonathan. So a few quotes from Illusions. One is, "Anyone who's ever mattered, anyone who's ever been happy, anybody who's ever given any gift into the world has been a divinely selfish soul, living for his own interest, no exceptions." So that was one of the pearls of wisdom from Illusions. Your only obligation in any lifetime is to be true to yourself. Being true to anyone else or anything else is not only impossible, but the mark of a fake Messiah. The world is your exercise book, the pages on which you do your sums. It is not reality. Although you can express reality there if you wish, you can also feel free to write nonsense lies or tear the pages. So again, just that continual teaching that this world is not real. I guess like Hinduism, Brahman, that's not real. It's all illusion. It's what you make it. And then the last one, 2,000 years ago, they didn't have a word for imagination, and faith was the best they could come up with for a pretty solemn bunch of followers. So sadly, I believe, again, in looking back and realizing that my mother was searching and I took those beliefs, but I think I took those beliefs, coupled them with what was taught in this book and that powerful parable myth where it supersedes your restrictions and gets into that subconscious, really was what took root. And I took that from there, and I continue to read different things and expand, and those beliefs and the positive thinking elements were very strong. But like I said, there were little crumbs from God along the way. But while being steeped in this unbiblical spirituality, God was there. And miracle upon miracle, in middle school, no less, in school, there was a gym teacher who I later found out on Facebook. I didn't know this, but was a nun, but she was teaching in school. I didn't know this. And in 8th grade, she led myself and about 4 other girls in her office after class one day in the salvation prayer, which again, that was a miracle. God is a miracle, and that she could actually do that in a public school is even more miraculous, I think. But so I went home very excited and told my mom. And sadly, she dismissed it right away. Her comment was, "Well, you know that's not true, don't you? And you know there's no hell." So I was thrown pretty immediately into confusion. And I went from there. I tried to continue on in that belief. It was 8th grade, probably 8th grade into 9th grade. I would read. Sadly, I didn't read the Bible, I don't think, but I would try and read books or talk to people. And I went to McEachern High School, again, out in Powder Springs. And I don't know if this was unique in the 80s or not, but it was cool to be Christian in high school. Everyone was part of FCA, the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. Everyone went to, actually the cool church was Roswell Street Baptist Church. That was the cool church to go to. And some people went to St. John Episcopal's on the square, but they didn't really answer any questions. And they said they believed the things, and I thought they believed the things, but I also saw they weren't doing the things all the time. But there was no one to answer my questions. And quite frankly, I remember being on my knees in my bedroom alone and praying to God, give me just blind faith. Let me believe like these other people believe. Don't let me have all these questions, because I had so many questions. But sadly, God did not grant me that blind faith. And what little I knew was just not strong enough. And I was confused and weak, and turned my back on Jesus and entered into my young adulthood and college, with this very false foundation and very false beliefs. So just to kind of encapsulate what beliefs I carried then, and honestly, and I carried those beliefs through most of my adulthood, but just to kind of list them. So definitely belief and power of the mind was paramount. That again, that self is center, that self is most powerful. The unseen power of the world was there for anybody to tap into if you just knew how. The power was available if we would just, again, release the shackles of our doubts and our inner of what we were being taught was wrong. Believing in reincarnation. Of course, we didn't believe in the reincarnation of animals, but came back as the people, and you come back again and again until you learn whatever lesson it was you were supposed to learn. And where that lesson came from, who dictated, I don't know, but we were supposed to just come back again and again and again until you learned what you were supposed to learn. We were born good. People may do evil things, but not evil by nature. We're good by nature. I didn't realize how corrosive that idea was until fairly recently, but quite the corrosive idea, undermines a lot. That we were all God's children just by virtue of being created, that pantheism thing, we're in God, God's in us, God's in everything, just by virtue of breathing and being created, we're all God's children. It didn't take Jesus to bridge that gap. Jesus did everything he did in the Bible, so we did believe that. But we believed he did everything in the Bible, not because he was God. We believe that God, that the people deified him out of ignorance. He was actually an elevated soul who came back to teach us because he wanted us to learn what he had learned, and that we deified him again out of ignorance, but that we could do everything he did, and he did everything he said he did. Our life purpose, again, is to learn this, whatever lesson we're supposed to learn, and then we can move on to the next level, the next level, the next level, until you go back to your origin of creation, God. I mean, we did believe in God. All religion are equal, all roads lead to God. So all of that, of course, no hell. There's no need of salvation. There's no need for Jesus, and really no need for a transcendent God if we can transcend, or if we have that all within. So these are the beliefs that I carried with me, and graduated high school and entered college. I graduated high school in '82. Did go to Kennesaw the first 2 years, and then did graduate from Georgia State the second half with that, like Jeffrey said, that marketing and journalism and marketing. But I got to tell you, not a serious student. I did want to get through school, but my bigger concern was social. And my social came from restaurant business. I was a commuter student, and I lived at home and would go to school, and then go from school to go to work, and waited tables and work my way through school that way. It sounds a bit virtuous, but it's not. I don't know. I don't know if anybody else has worked in the restaurant business, or if you know anything about it. It's pretty darn decadent, especially in the 80s. It was a lot of cash. We had a lot of cash in hand. There's a lot of parties and a lot of fun things to do. And quite honestly, I saw no reason not to just dive right in, and I did. I bought into the social beliefs of the time. I had all the other beliefs I was telling you about, but the social beliefs, at that time, I believed abortion was fine to a point. At least I had a limit on it. I was a proponent of euthanasia. In senior in high school, I was on a debate team, and we debated pro and con euthanasia, and I was on the pro side. I believed in all and just unfettered free speech. Again, as a freshman in college in our speech class, our controversial speech, I chose to do on free speech. And what I did was I went and bought a Playboy magazine. I was embarrassed. I have that, at least that much. And I held it up in class and I said, okay, how many people find this offensive? And of course, half the people raised their hand and half didn't. So I said, well, those are what our pornography laws are based on. They're purely subjective. Therefore, we shouldn't have them. So I held on to those. I saw nothing wrong with homosexuality at the time. I didn't think they should force our ideas on other, and at least I didn't think they should adopt children, but I didn't see anything else wrong with it. So I guess on those points, those political, cultural points, I was much more of a libertarian. But I was still searching spiritually. I'm very interested in spiritual. I was spiritual, not religious, as they say, which I know is terrible. But I would read astrology books, but mostly I would study or read about Eastern religions. I believe that they were superior to Christianity because they were more ethereal, they were more mysterious, more mystical, and they believed in the ultimate. They believed in, the soul is primary, the body as superfluous, and they also still believed in reincarnation. But as, these beliefs were there, and universalism, well, and of course, universalism, since we'll all be reunited. But even so, in this decadent restaurant world and being kind of immersed in these weird spiritual ideas, I was exposed a little bit to C.S. Lewis. So I'd never heard of him, and I was probably a sophomore or junior in college, working at a restaurant called the Crab House, which is on 41. If anybody's lived here a long time, you may have heard of it. You may have even been there. But there was a woman who worked there, and we would talk about books, and she goes, "Hey, have you ever read Screwtape Letters?" And I'm like, "Well, no." I read it, and I really liked it. I probably didn't understand it. I didn't have a problem believing in spirits. I believe there were spirits, good spirits and bad spirits. So that was not a problem, but I didn't probably get the deeper concepts, but I did like it. At the same time, there was another couple that worked there, and the husband, his name was John. He was very much into theology and spirituality. And he gave me one of still my most prized possessions. He gave me a book set. I don't know if you can see it. C.S. Lewis. And in this book set, which this is from the 80s, I still have it. It was Abolition of Man, The Great Divorce, Mere Christianity, Miracles, The Problem of Pain, and Screwtape Letters. So I know I read The Great Divorce at one point, and of course Screwtape Letters, and I would look through the other books, but God was there, exposing me to these ideas at that age, hopefully planting seeds to uproot the other bad seeds, but they were there. He also introduced me to Narnia. I only read the first two. I read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe in the second book. But I have to say, it might be a little off topic, but I just love this so much. I just fell in love with Aslan, of course, or Aslan. I say it Aslan, but just fell in love with him. He would give me the warmest, coziest feeling, and I just thought he was amazing when I read those books, not really realizing then that he was the Jesus figure. But I heard recently that C.S. Lewis was really very good at responding to correspondence when he was alive. And there was a story I heard recently, and there was a young mother who wrote to C.S. Lewis about her young son, who was concerned that he loved Aslan more than he loved Jesus. And this is what C.S. Lewis wrote back, and I just thought I just had to share it. So he wrote back, he can't really love Aslan more than Jesus, even if he feels that's what he is doing. For the things he loves Aslan for doing and saying are simply the things Jesus really did and said. So when Lawrence thinks he's loving Aslan, he's really loving Jesus, and perhaps loving Jesus more than he ever did before. So I thought that was amazing. And I thought that was amazing that back when I really was not a believer, I fell in love with Jesus and didn't even know it. So I had to share that, even if it was a tad off topic. So, all right, this time I'm about 23 years old, junior in college, working at the Crab House. And it's at this time that I met my future husband of the time, not my current husband, but my future husband at the time. His name was Michael Cabello. He was a little bit older than me, like 5 years older than me, and he was going to Life Chiropractic, which is pretty common in the restaurant business that days. A lot of people that worked in restaurants were students at Life Chiropractic, working their way through. He was from California, which made him cool just by that alone. And he was dark and he was mysterious. And I got to tell you, he was, oh my gosh, the biggest partier. He was a hedonist among hedonists, and but he was still spiritual. So I found that combination irresistible. Interestingly enough, he had, I mean, very contrary to what you would think in this ultimate party boy, he had a very strong, almost zealous belief in the gospel. Didn't live it. And sadly, it came out more when he'd been drinking. But I mean, he knew the gospel and he talked about the gospel, and he really believed, I think he really believed in it. I think so now. I didn't at the time. I just wrote off his musings to just spiritual talk. But I think he really believed in them. So that combination of things, he and I did embark on a tumultuous relationship of 2 years on again, off again. And but after about 2 years, we did move in together. It was about that time I'd already graduated Georgia State and was floundering around trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And he would be graduating soon from Life Chiropractic, knowing that when he graduated, he was going to be moving back to California, which I was excited about. I wanted to go. I did retain a little common sense. I said, I am not moving across country if we're not married. So we got married. We eloped to a little Justice of the Peace down in downtown Atlanta in July of 1989. And then a month later, in August of 89, we sold everything we owned except our cars and our clothes. And we drove across the country and went to San Diego. But I got to tell you, I was 25 and he was 30. But I got to tell you, it was rocky from the starts. It didn't take me long to realize that the charming, gregarious party guy with the occasional dark moods was really the dark, moody guy with all kinds of demons that was occasionally gregarious, usually when he'd been drinking. So he drank often, he drank heavily, but was always able to work no matter what, or how drunk he got or how late he was out the night before, he would make it to work the next day. But again, it was a pretty rocky thing. And as many young wives believe, young wives who are in love, I thought my love could heal him. I'm wrong, of course. My love can't heal or change anybody. Only God can do that. But darkness can have its effect on others. And so instead of my love healing him, it really had, I grew very angry and bitter and resentful in the marriage. But we both worked long hours, but our relationship at home was quite cold and quite distant, and just not good. But again, God was there. Counterintuitively, in all this darkness and drinking and no fun, Michael wanted me to go to church. He would always try and get me to go to church. But sadly, I didn't want to go for a lot of reasons, none of them good. I didn't want to go because, well, I knew I didn't believe in the gospel, but mostly I didn't want to go because if Michael wanted me to do it, I didn't want to do it. I was really mad at him. I wanted to hurt him, so I didn't go. And if Michael was a Christian, I'm like, I don't want no part of it. So it was a combination of those things that I resisted that call. However, I remember one incident in particular, and this was before we had kids, so it was a long time ago in Rancho Pañasquitas, California, is where we were living. There was a church there, a Maranatha church, and Michael finally convinced me to go, dragged me there, kicking and screaming and snarling the whole time. But I went, and I remember to this day, quite literally, I was having to hold on to my chair not to get up and answer the call of God. I fought tears and sobs the whole time. And the reason, sadly, the main reason was pride. I refused to let Michael see that he was right, that God could touch my heart. And it was such a powerful experience. I still remember it, but sadly, I did not answer God's call. And I think to this day, how much different our lives would have been had I answered that call. But I walked out of that church angry and snarling at Michael still. So we moved on from there. When we were married 7 years, I became pregnant with our first child, Josie. And actually during that time, Michael was really nice during that 9 months. It was kind of a hiatus. So that was good, but it didn't last long. When I got back when I went back to work from maternity leave, we kind of went back to our Cold War. I say Cold War because we didn't yell and scream, but we were cold and distant. Sarcasm and barbs were our weapons. Withholding affection was our mode of being. But go figure, this is a bad atmosphere for a baby. I did not realize that our cold contempt for one another was the very air of our home. And this became apparent when Josie started to prefer her babysitter to me. I was a property manager, and there was a person who lived on site, and she would watch Josie while I was at work, and Josie would prefer her and cry when I would go to get her. And this broke my heart and was a catalyst to go to counseling. So in going to counseling, she figured out pretty quickly that, well, you've turned off all your emotions to numb yourself from the pain of your marriage. You got to turn your emotions back on if you want to be able to have a relationship with your daughter, because she doesn't feel safe with you. Even if I loved her dearly and thought I was showing her love, but apparently she couldn't feel it. So we did that. Worked really well with Josie, but what it did was also turn my emotions back on for this marriage that was so bad. And in doing so, I realized I couldn't do it. I couldn't stay with him. I had decided that it was just untenable, and the counselor and I were working on a plan to go. I had a plan going. I had a job, a promotion that would take me a half hour away from where we currently live, which would have been much farther away from Michael's job. And I was poised to become yet another divorced single mom raising my daughter. But then something happened. It was one evening at work, probably a Friday, I think, talking with my coworkers. We're laughing, talking. The phone rings. It's my mom. Not unusual, because my mom and I talk all the time. Like I said, still best friends. But this was different. There was something in her voice, and she was calling to tell me she had been diagnosed with cancer, breast cancer, very serious, very aggressive breast cancer that not a good prognosis. And that turned my world upside down. Like I said, my mother was still my idol, still my most beloved person. And I was 35, and I still relied on her for moral support and security. And that was taken out from under me. But what it did do, switched my focus. So I went to go visit her briefly, and then I went back again for 2 weeks while she had the treatments, and then came back from that to work. And at that time, I decided I wanted to go and be with take Josie and be with her for a month at Christmas. I don't remember how far in between the times it was, and take a family medical leave. Knowing that taking a family medical leave in a corporation, it's a death knell. When they realize that that work is not first and anything else is first, you're not, they don't look at you anymore. But I went anyway. My mother was more important, and it was more important to me to see her and her to see me. So I went. It was really very good. But yeah, I came back, and sure enough, I'd lost rank. My boss realized she could live without me, and yeah, I wasn't in any danger of losing my job, but I was no longer on that fast track of moving up. And it was around this time that I remember a specific conversation with Michael. We were sitting at the table, and he said something to the effect, I just keep wondering when things are going to get better between us. And I remember looking at him going, I don't think they are. I had realized I didn't think it was ever going to get better. This is it. It didn't get any better. I had no hope that it would ever be better. And I think he was surprised. I was surprised he was surprised. And it had been such a cold and empty relationship for so long. I couldn't imagine that he thought it would get any better either. But not long after that, he promised me the things that I had always wanted that I didn't know he knew I wanted. So he said, you can quit work, you can stay home with your baby, you can have another baby, and even go back to school if you want. So I was shocked again that he even knew I wanted these things. I don't remember saying them, and I held him to it. So about a year later, I was able to quit work. This was in 2000. So I was able to quit work, stay home with Josie, For about a year, I worked in Michael's office, and during that year, got pregnant with our second child, Nick, my son. That was all good. But right about the time when I had Nick, so I quit work. So for the first time, not working at all, my identity was no longer work. It was going to be at home. We bought our first house. And Michael had started it, and I expanded his practice, his chiropractic practice. So here we are launching into all these new things. I'm a new mom, 2 kids, not working, staying at home. Here's Michael. He's the sole bread provider. He's got a mortgage, and now he's got 2 kids. And we were both in this very tumultuous state. However, being who we were on opposite sides, and we were not helping each other. We were both drowning, and I think we were pulling each other down faster than we could think of. So it was a very dark time. It should have been a hopeful time. It was a very dark time, a very tough time. And in addition to that, the oddest thing, when Nick was born, Michael rejected him. He had been a very loving, involved father with Josie and loved her dearly, and was very helpful and involved. And when Nick was born, it was weird. He wouldn't hold him unless I physically put Nick into his arms. He didn't want to look at him. He didn't want to be with him. It broke my heart, and I didn't understand it. And it was terrible. So into this dark time, the most unexpected angel from God walked into my darkness. We lived in this little neighborhood, and I'd seen this woman walking around the neighborhood. She was probably like 10 years older than I would, and she'd be pushing a baby in a stroller who was about 6 or 7 months old, and we'd wave each other every now and then. But I was literally lying on my living room floor one day. Josie was watching cartoons. Nick was on a little mat beside me. He was still little, and this lady comes tapping on my door. And what was more surprising than her tapping on my door was she invited me to go to the park, and I went. I actually went. We went to the park, and this lady, her name is Jacqueline. She was loud, a little pushy, and overtly Christian. I mean, she was one of those kind of Christians who was boastful and unashamed of the gospel, and she talked about it to everybody. And we talked about it, and she asked me if I had been saved, and I said no, and I know what it is, and I don't believe in it. And she was shocked, but she did not let it deter her. But let me go back to this overtly pushy Christian lady. Normally, I would have run as fast as I could from someone like that. I would not have wanted to be around someone like that. But God knew that at this time, I was ready to have that person in my life. So she didn't give up on me when I told her that I know exactly what that means, and I don't believe it. So she came around, she introduced me to her friends and to her daughter-in-law. She invited me into her Bible study group in her church, and I went, shockingly. And in the Bible study group, we were studying Rick Warren's 40 Days of Purpose. I think a lot of people have done that, but I remember studying that. And after the first few meetings, I confessed to the ladies that I was not a believer, that I was at best a seeker. They didn't reject me. They loved me. They befriended me. They kept me in, and it was pretty amazing. So during this time, you can see God working in my life. At home, still dark. Michael still rejecting Nick. Things aren't great. So, Jacqueline is talking to me, and she's of course giving me books because that's what I like, her books. And I was reading some books by James Dobson, Focus on the Family. One of them being Bringing Up Boys. And I have that one. And then I was reading the other one because Nick, even at that age, was strong-willed, so the strong-willed child by Dobson as well. But in the book, Bringing Up Boys, and I remember, and I looked back through it, and I couldn't find the sentence, but I could see where I could have gleaned this. But in reading the book, it seemed to me that Dobson was saying that a bad father was worse than no father. And Michael was still rejecting Nick outright. He was showering Josie with attention, ignoring me and ignoring Nick. And Dobson had said that no father's worse than a bad father. I mean, a bad father's worse than no father. And so for me, that was it. I resigned myself to staying with Michael for 18 years until Nick was grown. My prison sentence is how I thought about it. But when I heard that, I said, well, that's it. It's bad for my babies. So I told my parents. They knew the marriage wasn't great. I'd never really given them details. I told them more this time. They sent me money for a lawyer. I had the papers drawn up. I had a job lined up. Had a place to live lined up. I had an attorney. We had everything set. And on the day I was going to tell Michael, I sent the kids to a friend's house, and I told him. He responded at first angrily, but actually, after just a few minutes, it was the weirdest thing. He dissolved. He turned gray. His face, it was like he aged 20 years in front of me. And he said to me, and not in an angry way, and not in a manipulative way, I don't think I can do this. Because I don't think I can work, because I can't be one of those dads. And he was devastated. I didn't know what to do. We're standing, I'm in the kitchen, he's in the living room, and I'm standing there, and I quite literally felt like there was Satan and God on either shoulder, and I didn't know who was who, because I didn't know what was better for my babies, to stay or go, stay or go. I didn't know what was better. I was torn. And thankfully, I stayed. I told Michael, I said, you have to go to counseling, you have to find a counselor, and you have to go. If you don't, I'm leaving. And he did. Amazingly enough, he did. And actually, there were some real changes. Now, he had gone on his best behavior in the past, where he'd be nice for a little while and then he'd be mean again. But this one seemed to stick. So while God's working on him, he's working on my heart as well. And again, a couple of books came into play that really impacted me around this time. And one was A Case for Christ. This is a student version, but I had the regular version, but A Case for Christ. And interestingly enough, this is not a Christian book, but it's called The Red Tent. I don't know if anybody's ever read it, but it was interesting. Let me tell you how they work. So in A Case for Christ, read the whole book, but what impacted me the most, what was the key, was he said, you don't have to have all your questions answered to believe. It was an epiphany. I didn't know it. I always wanted all my questions answered. That had been my problem when I was a child. I needed questions answered. Nobody can answer them. And when I read that, it was a light went on. It was significant. At the same time with this book, The Red Tent, it's a historical novel, and it's written about Dinah, Jacob's daughter. I don't know if it was his only daughter, but his daughter, the one that was, raped by the prince. And but what the book does, it goes into great detail about Jacob and Israel and the family and the history and all of that around it and what happened between the characters. And what it did is I said, well, gee, I wonder how much of this is true. So I started reading the Bible. I went back to read the Bible to see, well, is that what Jacob really did? Was he really Israel? I had no idea Jacob was Israel until I read that book. And then I read about Abraham, and I read about David. And I read about these amazing, flawed people in the Bible. And of course, I thought what so many people, other people have thought, well, if God can love them, and if God can use them, he can love me. So that was huge, those two things. And then this was in 2004. And with this Bible study group, we went to a movie that was coming out then, The Passion of the Christ. That was the final straw for me in my salvation, quite frankly. Went to this movie. I cried the whole time. I don't know if anybody else did the first time they saw it, and I can't watch it again. It was too much, but I sobbed. I covered my eyes during the scourging. I couldn't watch it. But I left that movie theater. I got in my car, and I gave my life to the Lord, because watching that movie, I said, there's no way a human being could have ever done that. So that was it. But I'm gonna go a little bit further, because we all know that's not the end, it's the beginning. So I went right home and told Michael, who was very, very happy about it. And we started on a journey. We started on a slow baby step journey, but we started on this journey of learning to like each other. We started to talk to each other. We started to heal. And what was most miraculous and what was most beneficial was we forgave each other. God opened my eyes to my faults. I'd always blamed everything on Michael. It's his fault. It's not my fault. Always. But God opened my eyes to what I had been doing. And I was able to show Michael love in a much better way. And it was amazing. We started going to church, at Calvary Chapel Church, which we loved. Met amazing people in this church. Michael liked Calvary Chapel. And so anyway, it was amazing. So again, that was in 04. So Easter Eve, 2007, it was of course a Saturday. I'm at home, kids are out playing, and Michael walks into the house from playing a pickup basketball game. He walks in and he looks at me and he collapses on the floor. Never to get up again. He had had a massive heart attack and died. So there I was, 2 young kids. Daughter was 11, gonna be 11 on the 18th of that month. It was April 7th, 2007, and Nick was 6. But God's miracle to us was he gave us that gift of forgiveness, that we forgave each other. If we had not forgiven each other, it would have been so much worse when he died. And if I had not accepted Christ, I would not have made it. And he surrounded me with the most amazing Christian woman who nursed me through that first year of grief and helped me through it. I wouldn't have made it. That church family and those women that surrounded me. So in that grief and in that heartbreak, he gave us so much more and made sure that we were taken care of in that. So that was in 07. In 08, I moved back to Georgia to be with family. I didn't really have family, not family out there. So we moved back here with my kids to be near family, and moved out to Douglasville, which is where my mom is. And kind of that's in 09, I met Paul, and then we got married in 2012. And so here we are. So kind of the conclusion is that, you know, God was there the whole time. He was just there the whole time. And I've thought back on this, and I don't know, honestly, if that middle school conversion was real. And God, I think it was. And I think I turned my back on God, but that he was courting me and wooing me and pursuing me all of those years later until finally I gave in. It took me a long time, but thank goodness, thank God he didn't give up on me. But I do, of course, see how that basic structure of the New Age world view, how it was formed. I had new light on that, but of course, how terribly inadequate it is in real life. We cannot turn inward and pull strength from within. There's just not enough. We are not enough. All the positive thinking, all the visualization does not change reality, contrary to what these people will have you believe. There are absolute truths, and there is reality, and we cannot change that with our thoughts. We can make reality better with our thoughts, but we cannot change the structure of reality. If we just turn inward and not outward to a transcendent, saving God, we end up empty and bitter and resentful and lonely and alone. We struggle from day to day with little hope that tomorrow will be any better. We're flawed and we're weak, and we cannot do it on our own. We need God, and we need Jesus, who's the way, the light, and the truth. And I'm oh so grateful that God saved me. That's it.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Donna. That was wonderful.
Thank you. Thanks.
Well, let's open things up. Comments, questions.
Well, one thing I thought was interesting, because you said, of course, you were born in the 60s, and I was born in the late 70s, so I was growing up in the 80s. And, you know, the New Age was the big, you know, sort of bugaboo of the Christian church. I mean, at least the church I went to, you heard about it all the time, how it was going to, you know, leading the way for the Antichrist and all that sort of thing. And then it dies out, and you never hear anyone hardly talk about the New Age anymore. Though Melissa Dougherty on YouTube is a very good source for that. But it's interesting how a lot of the beliefs that you're talking about, all the positivity, you know, the good vibes, it's so permeated our culture now that it's not seen as a separate thing anymore.
Exactly.
People don't talk about the New Age anymore because the New Age itself makes it sound like it's something else, where it's so much a part of our culture now.
It's insidious. It seeped into everything. It became such accepted truth that, yeah, you don't have to separate it anymore.
Yeah,
It is a part of the culture.
Yeah, there's a great YouTuber, Melissa Dougherty, who has a story very much like your own, came out of New Age into Christianity. And
Mhm.
she does YouTube videos sort of exposing New Age thought in the church and how just insidious and sort of how it's permeated everything now.
Yes. Agreed. I can absolutely see how the seeds of what we are sowing now, or what we're reaping now from what was sown then, especially the reality, reshaping reality, that we can, whatever we want to do. If you want to be a man, you can be a man. If you want to be a woman, you be a woman. It doesn't matter what reality is that was sown back there, and your thoughts can change reality. So agreed.
Eric, would you mind taking it just very briefly a step further? How do you see New Age pseudo spirituality being assimilated into modern Christianity?
Well, I see a lot of, again, this sort of positive thought, this sort of, and of course we spiritualize it and call it faith or something like that, or prayer, but we do have this idea that, if we just believe hard enough, then God will basically change reality for us or do what we want. And, we give it a Christian name, but ultimately that's the kind of thinking that comes out of New Age.
Yes, that's very much integrated into the so-called word of faith movement, the prosperity gospel, and so on. Yes, I was thinking that myself.
Yeah, but
as Donna was talking.
I see it in just normal evangelical churches too. Maybe not to the same extent, but there is a lot of that attitude in there.
Isn't that name it and claim it kind of thing that goes along with that? I think. I don't know. I've heard people say that. Name it and claim it, and you can. Yeah. That's it.
Yeah. God is our cosmic servant,
our genie,
and that sort of thing. And what you do is rifle through the Bible and find a text that you feel led to claim, and God is obligated to to come through on your behalf.
Yes.
Very, very self-centered.
And then, of course, progressive Christianity, you have people like Richard Rohr, who's just straight up New Age. And it's more and more Christians sort of getting pulled into his very pantheistic notions of God. And he, again, cloaks it in Christian language, but it's very much straight out of the New Age handbook.
Yeah, there are two really terribly insidious influences in especially American Christianity, but this is probably worldwide as well. One is obviously so-called progressive Christianity, which is really just totally apostate, heretical pseudo-Christianity. But the other would be the word of faith movement, the prosperity gospel. So I think both are encroaching into evangelicalism, and those two extremes are certainly to be taken account of, and we need to be very, very cautious about those kind of influences. Other comments and questions?
Yeah. Bruce.
Yes, Bruce.
Yeah, just while we're talking about New Age and the church, I wonder if you see, I don't know a lot about this particular book, but it seems to me that it would be appropriate, the moralistic therapeutic deism issue. That God's there. He wants you to have a good life, and you can call on him if you need him to sort of get to the next level or the next plane or whatever, but you don't have to. It is a sort of self-help sort of world, which is true of a lot of the New Age stuff.
Yeah. If we went back 50, 60 years, back to the 1950s, we would have Norman Vincent Peale, and then later, others as well, popularizing that same heresy, frankly. Yes.
Jeff, wouldn't Robert Schuller from the Crystal Cathedral?
Yes. Yeah, Robert Schuller would sort of be the successor to Norman Vincent Peale. Now, who would be a contemporary who's in that same line? Well, it would be Joel Osteen, probably most prominently. Mhm.
Awful.
Other comments, questions?
Was this, is this really the foundation of where we're at politically too? As far as worshiping creation with the scaring of the climate change and everything?
Well, certainly everything has political implications and political ramifications. I'm not sure I necessarily see a direct link, but perhaps there could be. Donna, you have any thoughts on that?
I don't know so much on the environmental, definitely in the cultural, in the transgender movement for sure. I think I see that again in that creating your own reality. Maybe in the New Age movement, because you do worship, you have worshipers of the earth, Mother Earth, that could be part of that environmentalist, and where people are pestilence, we're sucking the life out of the planet. We'd just be better off without us. I mean, I can see that, but if you're going to worship the earth, then you're going to think we're ruining it, and that animals are equal. I can see that as well. Again, that pantheism, because that people are talking about how animals are. I want to treat animals as equal. When there's some silly thing in New York about a lawsuit about some elephant, anyway, about he needed to have he had rights to hubris or something. Anyway, so I could see that going into from the New Age. I think
You made one comment, and I can't remember exactly the context, but it was maybe while you were in college and you were working in a restaurant, and you were surrounded by a lot of people who were very hostile to Christianity. That I think that might have been the context. And you made a comment that sounded to the effect that they equated faith with imagination.
Yeah, that was it was one of the things from Illusions, I think. They said that instead of calling Jesus or whatever meant imagination, not faith, they called it faith instead. Yeah. So that was where that thought was. Just strange. Yeah.
Yeah. Other thoughts?
Jeffrey.
Yes, Mike.
Yeah. One thing that comes to my mind that may not be directly New Age, but this battle we seem to be having within this country, both politically and within the religious section, is the universalism versus principle. And when I say universalism, the word unity comes to mind. And I know what has recently gone on with Mount Bethel. An open table, that sounds very attractive. But if the open table is good, the bad, the ugly, it makes no difference. We're all going to heaven. We just need to get along. And I think that's sort of an Eastern belief and New Age belief. And I know with a near-death experience, one of the biggest problems I've had with people who are not Christian is that we all have these experiences. They're trips to heaven, and we're all going there, so don't worry about it.
Yeah.
And that to me is all mixed up in this New Age kind of thinking that it's all okay. We're all okay. I'm okay, you're okay, we're okay.
Yeah.
Right. And then it's just mean to put restrictions and limitations and do's and don'ts, and how dare you threaten my belief system, right? And I didn't say earlier, but the New Age belief is such a buffet of things. I think that's the attractiveness of it. You can go through New Age and go, oh, I like this, or I don't like that, or you can mix things together to create your own belief structure. And then in today's culture, it's like, well, who are you to question my beliefs? And I think that's that universalism that we all are equal. We can all create whatever we want and be whoever we want. So.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Donna. And I think that is a great attraction of the New Age. And that is, as you say, it's a buffet style or cafeteria style quote, spirituality, where you can integrate aspects of Christianity with Buddhism, Hinduism, and even the occult, for that matter.
Oh, yeah.
So it's kind of a do-it-yourself, individualistic approach to, quote, spirituality. And I think that appeals very much to our egos and the fact that we really want to be in control. We, rather than God being in control, we want to be the captain of our own soul.
Question can I ask Donna a question?
Yeah.
When you were talking about New Age and how the real you is your mind and your thoughts and how thoughts control reality and so on, that also reminds me of ancient Gnosticism, where the body was not the real you, just the soul is the real you. So as you came to Christ and as you made that transition, was that an issue for you with dealing with the body soul unity that Christianity teaches, as opposed to what I see? Again, this is, I think, I don't know if you call it manifestation of the New Age or just a manifestation of Gnosticism, but there's still a lot of people who in the church who talk about the body as a prison and something I'm going to escape from someday and that sort of thing. Was that an issue for you?
Not terribly. It took me a long time actually I did carry that belief in that our bodies I thought for the longest time our bodies didn't matter at all, that it was just the spirit that mattered. I did not know that they were integrated, and that so that definitely was a belief I carried with me really into Christianity. It took a while for me to learn that we are forever united with our bodies in some way. They do matter, but not I didn't view the body in a negative way. I didn't have that. I did, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the Gnostics also didn't they kind of think that they had special knowledge and that you had to have a special knowledge to know what they knew. I felt like the New Age was like that, we know something that other people don't know. We know we're better than Christians. They're so stuck in that old way. And I felt like it was Gnostic in that way as well. So.
Very good point. It really appeals to this sense of inherent superiority.
Yes. Yeah.
That is so prevalent. And that is that I am more enlightened than most people.
Right.
The only problem is most people believe that. But it takes us back to Platonic philosophy, actually, and the kind of Gnosticism that was practiced in the second and third centuries, and that somewhat at least attempted to interact with Christianity in those days, is called Neoplatonism. And it was based on this idea that certain people are specially enlightened souls. And they would try to integrate that into Christian theology as well. And as far as the soul and the body are concerned, some Gnostics believed, like presumably Plato did, and that is that all that matters is the soul, not the body. So that would drive some of these Gnostics toward asceticism, self-denial, a very rigid approach to containing bodily desires and even bodily needs, for that matter. But on the other hand, apparently most of them gravitated to the other extreme, and that is if the body doesn't matter, you can do anything with your body. And it doesn't affect and impact your soul. And again, talk about a great appeal to people today. And perhaps one of the factors that might appeal to some people about the New Age movement is you can be very spiritual, but you can also be very hedonistic and just indulge your body, because after all, it doesn't really matter.
Right.
Jeffrey, Iraj here.
Yes, Iraj.
Yes. First of all, I want to thank Donna for such an honest presentation.
Thank
You
you.
spoke from your heart. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I think you mentioned that in your early belief in New Age, you also believed in the Gospels and in the Bible. And my question for you is, at that point, what did you think about crucifixion and resurrection and ascension of Jesus Christ?
And what I remember, I believed everything that happened in the Bible, that Jesus did all the miracles, that he died and that he rose again. But again, it was by his own power. I didn't think about the ascension. I didn't know about that. But rising from the dead was not impossible for anybody, because we just have to again, release the power that is there for all of us, and we too can do as Jesus did and more. I mean, that really was the mantra of our home and belief. So it was not at all presented in a saving way, that Jesus didn't die to save us. He was killed because people misunderstood him. He never said he was God, is what I was told. And that he was it was ignorance that said that, and he was killed because of ignorance. But yes, he did rise from the dead because he was a completely elevated soul and had the power to do so. So that was, it was still it was a limited way of looking at his power.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Donna, I know both you and Paul enjoy music. And was there any particular music that fed your spiritual inclinations back then, or movies or anything like that? Oh, you mentioned Jonathan Livingston Seagull, and I think when you might have mentioned that to me months ago or whatever, the reason I expressed such surprise was I hadn't heard that that title in about 40 years at least. But I know Neil Diamond, actually, who was a very popular recording artist back in the late 70s. Neil Diamond actually came out with an album entitled Jonathan Livingston Seagull.
Oh, wow. I didn't know. And that there was music at the time that now I know, looking back. My mother loved John Denver, and I didn't realize, what a kind of new age kind of person he was with his lyrics. But not specifically. Like, see, I do like music, but quite honestly, my music taste is very pedestrian. I always usually like just the popular pop music. But and looking at it now, or as I've gotten older, I can look back at the lyrics as you've done it, and even outside of that, and what they actually mean on a deeper level, and the power that they carry. These subliminal messages that they send. You're hearing these things and you're singing these things and incorporating them as a belief without really even realizing it. So,
yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, anything else before we close this session out?
Donna, it's Karen Burgess. I just wanted to reiterate, you did a great job, excellent job in presenting your story. Thank you so much for being vulnerable and willing to share that with us. It's just very inspiring.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you, Karen. Thank you.
Yeah.
And this is Joyce Bray.
Yes, Joyce.
I loved how you and your husband finally had a marriage that was touched by God, and the way you tell it is very, very compelling. And I'm assuming he was a Christian in the end. Was he a Christian when you met him?
He was, and that's just it. I really think he was. I think he had a real conversion. He had told me that he did when he was probably 18. He had a conversion.
Yeah.
But he had quite a terrible childhood and so many things to overcome that even though he had that real conversion, he wasn't able to really walk it until God brought us both there at the same time, and we helped each other. And in those few years before he died, we were both very active in church, and he was very much a man of God and walking with God. And I know for sure that's where he is. He's in heaven, and I'll see him again. Yeah.
True story of the power of God.
That was, I tell people that was God's miracle. There's no way that marriage could have been resurrected other than God. No way at all. Yeah.
Exactly. Thanks for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Well, Donna, that was really an excellent presentation, very informative, very heartfelt. And so we need to talk about turning that into some kind of a text.
Thanks. Well, I
we
was a
can
journalism
send.
major. Who knows? So yeah.
Well, thank you. And thanks to all of those of you who were joining us this evening. As with all of our sessions, this one is recorded. So if you found it as meaningful as I did, you probably did find it as meaningful as I. You might want to refer a lot of friends and others to it as well. So again, looking forward to next week. That'll be our final session in our summer series. Rhonda Thomas, president of Truth in Education, will be speaking on new threats to American education, as if we needed any more new threats. What every Christian should know. So whether we are just currently raising children, or grandparents, or just concerned Christians, this is a presentation next week that I'm sure you would very much benefit from. Very much looking forward to it. Well, blessings on your evening and the rest of your week. Good
Hey,
to see you
Jeffrey,
all.
can I say one quick thing? I'm so
Yes,
sorry.
please.
I know you're
Mhm.
signing off. I was looking at the chat and I saw that Andrea had a question. Do you mind if she just asked if my mother ever accepted Jesus?
Oh, I did not see that. Okay.
Yeah, I
Thank you,
see it
Andrea.
down here. Anyway, I just wanted to say very quickly, no, not yet, but my conversation with her at the beginning of researching this talk has given me great hope, because she actually said she believes in the Trinity. So she had gone to Catholic school. I know, who knew? So we didn't really, I've not talked to her about it much because I always thought I knew what she believed. So my brothers and I both are actually pleasantly surprised, and we will be speaking with her more about it, because we're all three, believe it or not, all three of us are Christians. I didn't say that. My brothers are very strong men of God, and I have become a woman of God, and that's a miracle as well. So definitely pray. My mother's name is Bobby, so we can all
Amen.
pray for
Amen.
that. And
Do
yeah,
you
great
plan
hope.
on recommending that your mom watch your presentation this evening?
I will now. I wanted to make sure I paid her proper due. She's very resistant to Zoom. She's 77 and really good with tech, but she thinks Zoom is she thinks it's subversive. So maybe I can send her the recording.
She and I may have something in common there.
All right. So I'm sorry. Thank you. I didn't want to delay that, but I saw that question and wanted to answer it. So
Okay. Thank
right.
you.
All
Well,
right.
blessings and good evening. Good to see you all.
Bye-bye.
Good evening.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.